I want to tell you about walking into an oasis and feeling like I just walked into my family's living room. It was more than just walking into their living room. It was about completely being safe from the social restrictions of the outside. Everything that the moral majority told you you couldn't do, it didn't exist anymore. It was a family that had only one rule: to love thy brother, and that was okay. When I think about this oasis, this place of total freedom, I can't help but feel like I lost a part of myself, a part of my family. That's why it's not about the space itself. It's about the community that's inside the space that helps you bring you back to that moment when you, the DJ, and everybody involved, it was you and them against the world, and we survived together.
Underground club because nobody, it was like a secret network. It was very much underground. No publicity about it. It was word of mouth. I know about it. I tell him, he passed it on. And that's how it grew.
It was underground, especially underground. And the most important for me was the music. The music was off the meters. There was nobody playing the music like Larry Levan, and especially the law.
The club got so underground that people would lauder outside the club like prostitutes, waiting for people with memberships. Waiting. You would have people paying you if you had a membership to get in that club. That's how fierce it was.
Listeners and the Master G Sound, we'd like to thank Larry Levan for starting our music here. He made it happen right here. Larry Levan for the Big Apple. Also, people recognize us. We really wasn't big in Chicago, but we introduced the music here. They took everywhere. London, Baltimore. So I want to thank everybody for the Paradise Tour. Let me hear everybody.
name right now in the music industry. Although he's gone, he's still here in good spirit. How should I say? He played only what he wanted to hear, not what the world wanted him to play. He always remembered that DJs, some of them were very exceptional. He always gave them that kind of credit. Larry felt that everyone was the same. I asked him one day when I went up on the booth and I said, Larry, what do you think of me on the dance floor? And he said, everyone is the same. He didn't have any segregation between genders, and he felt that everyone sweat from the same places.
But one of the things I want to share about a musical experience I had at the garage that I'll never forget was he was playing Release by Lean, and the crowd was going crazy. I'll never forget this. The crowd was just going crazy, and it was like, release yourself, release, everybody screaming. And then he had like this big screen, and he had the beginning part of when doves cry, and he had the dove, and the music going like, release yourself, and you see the dove crashing through the doors. And it's like, and then it go right back in, and the doors are shut. It be like, release yourself. And he did this for a long time, to the point where everybody started screaming. And it was like, at the same time, cause we was all bugging, looking at it like, let it go, cause the bird wanted to get released. You know what I'm saying? Yo, it was crazy, man. It was just beautiful to watch, and I was just like dancing and watching, like, let it fly, let it go, release it. And then all of a sudden, you just went, bam, crash, and it was like, don't. When doves cry, yo, it was amazing, man. It was amazing. I'll never forget that. That's what I remember Larry Levan for music.
I guess I was 17 when Frankie Knuckles started working at the gallery, and he had come to me one day and said, I want you to meet this kid. He's a little bit crazy, but he's very talented. His name is Larry Levan. A lot of people who didn't know him thought he was giving them shade and stuff like that, but he wasn't. He was just reserved. But once he got to know you, he was very flamboyant and wild and crazy. He had that personality, that kind of star quality about him. Immediately, like, if he was walking down the street with 2 or 3 other people, you noticed Larry. He just held his head up higher. He walked, with a presence. And he dressed really incredibly. I'd say from 1972 to 1976, we were, considered best friends. I just remember, like, one night I had a big fight with my brother and didn't want to come to work, didn't want to go to the gallery to play. And Larry had come over and he said, no one else could play. You have to come, and we don't want anyone else playing records. And he was, he was always on my side. He would he was always there for me. I actually had a girlfriend at the time, and he would, she was also his friend, and we all became friends. And every time I would have a fight with her, he would just come to my defense or just be there for me. One night we were at the gallery and it was closed. We weren't open, and this was like the first year of the gallery, so it was 1972. And he said, would you let me play records a while. We weren't open, we were closed. And I said, sure. And he started playing records and he started mixing. And he would ask me, you know, how is that mix? What do you think? What do you think of this? And I would just start telling him, you know, well, the things that was told to me, which were like things like don't cut off the vocal, try to make the blend natural. And he just took the information and worked with it almost immediately. It was like he got behind the turntables like he always was meant to be there. In the beginning, like when Soho and stuff like that was around, like he would play and then he would come to gallery afterwards, or when he was at the Bads. But you know, when the garage opened, then you know he would just, you know, he would be at the garage and that would be it.
Construction parties. It was like another world. I mean, the construction parties. I remember it clearly, like going up a ramp and all of a sudden it was in this huge, like blue-purple room. It was just, I don't know, it transformed. It was my first experience into something with atmosphere without detail. When it finally opened, there was a little bit of like sadness on my part because I thought that construction atmosphere was so fantastic, but I mean, that didn't, you know, mar the experience that was going to happen after.
When I first walked in there, I heard that sound system, I gagged.
Well,
I was like,
musician.
what the fuck is this? I was like overwhelmed and impressed, gagging, scared, because it was a very scary place. How important was the garage to New York? New York was the only, I mean, the garage was the only place where people could come be who they are, wanted to be. After the week was over, they came and they partied all night long.
Garage was the first. The garage was the first to have a system that was that unique or that powerful or that sound, whatever. The garage was the first club that had that space, that large. It was the first of most of the discotheque techniques at that time on that scale, and it worked. The fear might have come in when you said, oh, well, gay people don't party with straight people up until that point. Garage broke that barrier, broke it down.
No one looked at it and said, oh, there it is, the underground. It wasn't that. It was, what is this? And it epitomized, it went against all the stereotypical expectancies of what disco would be like at the time. Now, this is all from a club, from a dumpy garage 23 years ago.
Yeah,
we never saw the impact
like
there.
this too.
Never saw the impact. You just never saw it. Back then, but it was just a little bit after Stonewall. And at the time, black and Latino gays needed a place to go where they could be just as free, and whites as well. We didn't go in and go, wow, this is underground. What we did say was, this is different. It was curious because it had a combination of things: organization, architecture, professionalism, atmosphere, music, sound system. And no one knew Larry Levan as, wow. We just said, boy, this DJ's pretty good. You know, one night to go and to hear like your favorite song on that system, it was just, it never was the same. But I didn't go around telling people I found underground. We didn't know it at the time. We didn't even label it as underground. We just said, this is something you gotta check out.
Who do you think you are?
I think he was more into clothes, and I think he wanted to be a designer. I think that, you know, that was his that was his dream, I think, back then, was to be involved in clothes design and to design clothes or be a part of that industry, or the fashion industry. I remember one night Willie Smith came to the gallery, and Larry just went crazy. Willie was a big designer back then, and also the big designer Stephen Burrows, who was always at the gallery. Larry used to go crazy when he came in, and one night Calvin Klein came, and Larry just was like, Calvin Klein is here, Calvin Klein is here. And he just knew everybody in fashion. He knew all the models. So I think he wanted, I think that was where he was focused on. He was focused on the fashion industry.
Larry was really wild when we were young. I mean, orange hair, this, that, and the other, you know, in a period where it just wasn't done, you know. And he went to Erasmus High School, you know, so they weren't having it. They were not having it. In Brooklyn, Erasmus was not having it. Well, I mean, he took about as much of it as he was going to take, and that was it. But I mean, I remember going to have to meet him a couple of times at school, and one day I went there to meet him, and Larry would do shows, let me tell you. Larry was outside the school this one particular day I was going to meet him. He was outside in front of the school on top of this Volkswagen with this orange hair, and he had on a midriff shirt, and he had on these jeans where the hips was cut out. So actually there was only a piece covering up his genitals in the front. Yeah, and the crack is behind, but the rest of his hips was cut out. And he was on top of this car doing this dance of the seven veils, as we used to call it, because he was doing this number and stuff like that. And baby, these boys were standing out there in front of that school, and they were, all of a sudden, they was like, get him. And all I saw was a streak of orange just go. You know, and I'm across the street, and I'm like, oh, shit. So they didn't know me. I just saw them going after him. So I'm running to try and find out exactly where he's going. I mean, Larry could move. And I'm running behind to try and find out exactly what's going on and what's going to happen. You know, I eventually met up with him at his house later on. He got away from him. How, I never know, because there was enough of him. But Larry used to do strange shit like that. And I knew, hanging out with him, I'm going to either have to know how to really take care of myself, or we're going to end up getting killed out here.
The garage was why people talk about it. It's because it was special. Because Michael didn't count it wasn't the balance sheet. It was giving the people the best possible party. So many of the kids at the garage told me that the garage saved their life saved them from going bad, because they had a place to get rid of their stress.
I got thrown out of my house because my father didn't like gays. And he said, if you want to live in my house, you know, you can't be working in this club. And I was a young man, 16 years old. And I said, listen, you don't tell me what to do with my life, and if you don't want me to be here, I'll leave. So he took all my memorabilia, because I gave it to my younger brother, so sometime in this future they'll be able to show. And he threw it all away, and you know, that hurt it a lot, you know. So I went on my own, and I'm here today, 36 years later, you know, to tell you that I'm still alive. I made it, and never, you know, went through the system, and I'm doing all right. And I'm trying to spread the love and the knowledge of the garage, because it was very important to a lot of people. A lot of people had stress, a lot of people had problems, had nowhere to go, and you would go to the garage, release so much energy. When you left that club, you was in paradise.
For me, the Loft has a little bit of an edge to the garage and the gallery. None of them had that other spaciness and that other real delicate touch about certain records that made the Loft be what it was and created a whole other different dimension. It was really, truly an inspiration. It was truly like the only thing that ever existed that was like that. And I don't think that if the Loft had been there, the garage would have been quite the same. He certainly had a very clear vision of an aesthetic that he wanted to bring out and present to people, and a lot of that aesthetic sometimes had to do with sonics, on how good a record did sound, not just how great it was of a song, but how well it was recorded, on how it translated on sort of his absolute master system that he had there, which didn't need to be played very loud at all. It was not really apparent until you did experience it in those surroundings. The Loft has an immense contribution to a lot of what's going on right now.
This was a very private situation. The Loft was intended to not to be overground.
Well, people say the garage school of music, but really it's the Loft school of music. You know, that's really what it is. It became called Garage because the Garage was the club that got, you know, all the notoriety, because David was never really interested in making it into a huge commercial success. David was more interested in creating an atmosphere, creating sort of a family.
The Loft was a community. If you didn't have money, and as long as you had that invitation, you got in. Last thing in the world is be broke. But you want to be with your friends. You can't go out, you can't do this, you can't do that. Oh yes, but you can still go out and see your friends that night. Take an IO, write down an IOU. People didn't abuse that system. And so you never had to worry about missing a party if you didn't want to.
The Loft is a feeling. I don't even know how to go out anymore, because in some ways I'm still looking for that, you know, and it ain't happening. For me, I haven't found another DJ yet that has moved me the way David Mancuso has moved me.
I could find a space today, but the overhead, what is that gonna mean? Is people with less money could be able to afford to come in? As for people with more money, I can't go into a situation like that. It has to be something that can be affordable. It's there. Now it's getting harder and harder to do that in Manhattan. If I had something else going where I could afford to support it, then I wouldn't mind doing it. I've done that from time to time for the Loft many years ago. So it has to be, again, if you can mix the economical groups together, that's where you have social progress. That's very important to me.
99 Prince Street, and I was told it wasn't the original Loft, but that's the one I went to, you know, with my little rascal card that everybody wanted, you know, membership card. And I didn't realize how valuable that was till I, you know, came out the train station. Everybody's like, yo, man, can I go with you, man? Can I go with you? You know, everybody was like trying to get in on this card. You know, I'm like, damn, what kind of card I got here? You know, jeez, yo, man, I give you $10, man. Yo, I gotta go in as your guest. I was like, I don't know you. Shucks. But, you know, it was pretty valuable, you know. I'll never forget it.
Was that influential?
Sure, absolutely. Definitely. I mean, it changed my whole attitude from commercial radio music or whatever I bought at first to, you know, the basis of what I do now, which was a whole wide range of, you know, music or whatever. So David gets, you know, the hat off definitely for me. I mean, everyone's into Levan, and I love Levan, I love the Garage, but the Loft did it to me first. Definitely.
I wanted freedom. I wanted to feel free, and to be free, see people being able to be free in a situation where where it was private, and the only way you can do that is that way.
David Mancuso went to court so that he could have a court say, you do not need a cabaret license, people can dance in your home, and you can have a party.
I used to listen to acid rock and this and that, and blah, blah, blah. Mick Jagger, you know, Midnight Rambler and all that stuff, you know, just in my loft. Because my loft was my home.
We didn't program anything. We didn't know what the hell we were going to play. Remember that. We didn't know what record was coming next. For all those years, we never knew what the next record was going to be. The Loft really took hold as an event, or as a place to go.
Very nicely put.
In about 1972. It was 72 because David invited me in late 1970. And I, in turn, took Michael Capello and Francis and a bunch of other DJs.
I had such a social life at the time. I had so much free time.
So Francis would come whenever he could because it was only on a Saturday night, and we all worked on Saturday nights.
So I would come after work.
And the Loft was only open until 7 a.m. So we would leave work at 3:30. By the time we packed up our records.
Saturday nights was 3 o'clock.
Yeah, Saturday nights, the law in New York, I don't know what the law is now.
3, I don't know.
4:03, we start playing the last record.
You play your last record. It was last call at 2:30 for drinks.
So 3 o'clock on Saturday, 4 o'clock during the week,
You
every
out?
other night. So we'd get to the Loft at maybe 4 o'clock, so we'd have like 3 hours of the Loft, but we'd catch like the last bit of the peak. But this is again now 1972. Although the Loft had been happening before that for a while, but it was very, very underground, and it was black and it was gay, and it was just the most wonderful place I'd ever been, really, as far as.
And it was someplace where it was different. You could blend in and you were different.
Yeah.
The Loft. And you could be like, you could be like comfortable.
Yeah, the Loft was the most comfortable place you've ever been.
It wasn't like the sanctuary where you was like the place became occasionally with the lighting, a show place. You know, you could kind of blend in the Loft.
Who's Francis Grosso?
That's a good question.
And what did Francis Grosso do that's so significant today?
It's a heck of a question. When Francis, I guess, elevated the art to, or started making an art, something that became artful. I guess that's what Francis Grosso did.
Did Francis Grosso discover mixing? Was Francis Grosso?
I don't know. He was probably the first DJ, but I don't know if he discovered mixing it. It just turned out, I guess, like you discover fire. You know, one day something got hot, and you know they were eating it raw, and they decided it tastes better hot and cooked. I don't know. It was like that. It was like a whirlwind.
The fact that there were 2 turntables and somebody was mixing records together, not just playing one record after another, but creatively mixing, and we didn't call it mixing, and this has to be pointed out. We called them changes. Did you hear that change? Did you hear that change? Did you hear the change I made with those 2 records?
I actually said those words changes. Yeah. That's what it was. First of all, you have to know the music.
First of all, you really have to know the music.
Really?
You had to know every bar, every note of it.
On a regular LP at the time, you had your lighter sides would be where there was vocal quality, and the darker part would be sound. And you had to know that too. If you just want to play bit.
We were reading the grooves. Without headphones, we used to read the grooves. That's exactly what we did. We read the grooves.
How other things we did.
How else would you? That's what we did. We read the grooves.
I mean, you really had to know the music and know how it started. And like I said, the average 45 at the time was about 2 minutes and 13 seconds.
The average night was about 12 hours. At the Sanctuary, the people were like the show almost, because it was crazy. People were nuts. Everybody was just wild, absolutely wild. But at the Loft, the place, the Loft, the music, and the sound was the party. That was the event. So it was a whole different. It was all transitions when the party became
the party.
The party, exactly. With us, it was a night in a nightclub in a bar with liquor, and you had to deal with all kinds of different things. At the Loft, there was no liquor, so basically, you had people who were just expressing themselves in a whole different way. It was just, it was the tightness and the oneness with the music was just amazing.
Mancuso was arrested.
Yeah, David was arrested. Absolutely, I was there that night. What happened was, at the Haven and the Sanctuary, we used to have a light system where Green was there, the cops are nearby. Red was there at the door. White, they're in.
David was taking a tremendous risk in even having that kind of club.
Yeah, it wasn't a club; it was a party.
The police department, for one.
Yeah, I mean, he was having a gathering for people.
Of a lot of close friends.
It was time to just be up front, be who you were, and enjoy nightlife, because it was the only nightlife we had.
The most dedicated crowds I've ever seen, and they were dedicated to the garage, but not nowhere near the gallery and the loft. You'll never see a more dedicated crowd where it just gives you chills. Dedication, I mean, a lifestyle, man. You know what I'm saying? I remember asking a friend of mine when he told me he went to the loft at Prince Street for the first time, and I knew exactly what to ask him, because I knew that I was going to get a thrill asking him. I go, what did you say to yourself when you first seen them guys dancing the way they danced there, that lofting? He goes, man, I couldn't believe my eyes. He goes, those guys were breaking their backs on the dance floor. That's exactly how he put it.
Love was the soul.
The soul of it.
It was the heart, the soul. Like the garage was the party. The love.
You went to the loft, it was a house party, and it was more feeling because they were where the real dancers came from. That's when you use acrobatics, gymnastics, you use tap dancing, you use modern dance. The energy level was very strong because we had to. Most of us, the thing about it is, David wanted to do it like an orphanage. He realized that he was an orphan and he wanted to take that same kind of thing with him.
Yeah.
So he brought it to everybody and he fed everybody. Everybody paid a certain fee. The fee was just like $9.99 or $10.99 or $11.99, $12.99, and take that penny. And when you were there, everybody wore baggy pants, the gas pants. They had a parachute. When it came down to having like
mine on.
I'll tell you
$20 for a pair of those pants right there.
But the phenomenon was,
and that was just slide through the dance floor, lovely.
Right now, the funniest thing is, as time goes on, the dancing that we were doing there at the time, we had no name for it. Now I find it kind of ironic that it's termed as lofting.
When I came to the loft, and me and George already going to the garage, we thought we were dancers, you know. I went to the loft and I was actually intimidated because the guys were doing like things that we never ever saw, and they were so different in their own way that you gave them as much respect that we couldn't even get on the floor, George and I. We wouldn't dare make a move because we were like, this is the real deal.
Chicago.
really want to dance and you really want to go ahead and find out, you look at somebody in the corner and you find somebody dancing. It's not just the circle itself, it's from the heart. Because why? Whenever you go out, you want to take that same attitude that you had when you went to the garage, at the loft, and bring it to where you're at today.
Was not really the priority. The priority was the feeling, creating the feeling from one record to the next. The most important thing was not really to match the pace of one record to the other. It was to tell a story. If you're a DJ who sort of tells stories with the records and matches feelings, I don't believe that it's anything anybody can really teach you. It comes from within inside of you. Either you have it or you don't have it. To be the type of DJ that, you know, now is associated with the garage sound, you had to have that instinctual thing for matching the feelings and telling a story. And David Mancuso, of course, was the originator of that. And then you had, you know, Nicky Ciano and Larry Levan, who were both teenagers when David was playing on Broadway. They would try to sneak in there because you were supposed to be 18 to get in. And they, you know, they sort of studied David and then, you know, made their own style of it, but within the same school. And that is the feeling that Larry carried over to the garage.
Larry, for me, was like the premier DJ of the world. He created a musical atmosphere for you that led you on an experience that took you by the hand and led you there.
Larry Levan was a master of crowd control. You would find it hard-pressed to get off the floor because no matter, you know, whenever you thought you had had enough, we went into another direction with Larry. In the late 70s, we started working with South Soul Records. And Ken Carey, the owner of South Soul Records, spent his life in the clubs every night. And one day he called me up and said, we've got a new mixer coming in. He's getting pretty well known. He does these mixtapes, which are really great. And he has a great idea for one of our songs. And the next day in walked Walter Gibbons. Walter took you on a romantic flight. When we worked in the studio, what he would do is we would start with the song and continue building forward, and he would do it as if it was like a little mountain we were climbing to build to a peak. T, you had to dance, but it was more down to the ground. You would hear more of a tribal feel to it. But T came from another place. T came from a very underground place. Plus, he came from a black place, which was not that mainstream. You didn't see many black remixers in the late 70s. In the late 70s, you would find mixers like Francois K. You would find mixers like Walter Gibbons. You'd find mixers, Tom Savarese, the early mixers of that music of that time, and Tom Moulton, who were wonderful creative people. T. Scott, Larry Levan, they were from a very different crowd of people and a very different slant on the music. T. Scott definitely influenced Larry Levan because the music that T. Scott was doing, Larry was playing.
Larry was a good DJ, but I'm not going to say he was the greatest DJ in the world, but in terms of all the DJs that I've known, he was one of the most creative DJs in terms of selection of music. Sometimes he mixed very well, sometimes he didn't mix at all, but each time it was a new experience. That place was the birth of breaking the 12-inch, breaking new material. Larry took chances. Larry experimented on the crowd. Larry programmed you to like a record. I mean, you know, he didn't just work a record, he'd work it every week and bring in new mixes. And he had things that you couldn't get. So you went to the garage to hear what was happening, and then, you know, you went to the stores to buy your music and see if you could find those same mixes. Some of them you couldn't find because they were special. They were exclusive. The 12-inch actually bloomed because of that club.
What was really interesting was that this 12-inch, in many cases, turned records that were borderline into really big hits. And because the sound was so powerful, it just blew away the competition on anything that was on a 45.
12-inch is a tool for the DJ to ply his trade. Without a 12-inch, you can't play. You can play a CD, sure, but to have that wax in your hand, to feel it, to put it on the platter, to get that groove and to see the audience respond to it, that's what we live for. Right. That's what we live for.
That's how detrimental it is.
We play wax.
Exactly. That's right.
In other words, if you're cutting a ref disc, if you cut it in spec, a 45 is only that much. Okay, it's only like that much. But when you have a blank that's a 10-inch blank, then you can spread the grooves. So when you spread the grooves, you can get a lot more level.
And that was your making?
Well, yeah. I said, if we're going to make it like that, is there any way to fill it up? And you go, well, it's going to be a lot hotter, that it won't be cut in spec. And I go, well, who cares? It's only a ref disc. So then it was Ken Carey at Salso who wanted to make the first commercial 12-inch. He said, I think we could sell this thing. Everybody else thought he was crazy. But Kenny said, no, I'm going to try it. And he did it with 10%. That was the first commercial 12-inch. That's how the basis of the 12-inch really started. It was an accident because there was no 7-inch blank.
The 12-inch did, give way to the remixer.
Jelly Bean Benitez, Shep Pettibone, Tom Moulton,
Walter Gibbons,
Larry Levan, Frankie Knuckles,
right? Yeah.
Ron Hardy, of course.
There you go.
T. Scott. Oh yeah.
There's so many of them.
Records like It's All Over My Face, Go Bang. I mean, if you listen to the album version of Go Bang and what Francois did on the 12-inch, that's a masterpiece to me.
The record's like 20, 21 years old. And the crowd that comes here today, I don't think they know the original. So I'm not that shy. I get on the microphone and I will tell them that this song is 20 years old and you are listening to the original. And I incorporate a lot of the music that I play in my set that has to do with bringing the new sound to a new generation.
The importance of a remix in those days, it was like day and night. You would have a radio song that probably wouldn't reach any clubs at all. 90% of the records that were produced by record companies weren't played in clubs. The reason? Because they weren't dance records. So it's a very important tool that if you wanted a Larry Levan at the Paradise Garage or any club to break your record, you had to get a remix on the record. So it would be important on who you hired to do the right job on that. Most people used Larry Levan in those days because they knew that he had the biggest club and the most famous club in the world.
Larry's sound is, you could hear that he knew what he was doing. He knew what he wanted to hear. He knew if a song needed more bottom, if a song needed more highs. He extended a lot of breaks and parts, and he would take one little break and make it longer, and it became its own new part. You know, so a lot of that was an art in itself as well. Even though they weren't putting all new music, there was a lot of arrangement that was going on there, a lot of EQing, adding effects. You know, all those things made it made us do what we do today.
It was. I think it was, like I said, it was a movement. It was a subconscious movement that these people didn't realize they had their own cause, and they formed that cause within their scene, within the club scene.
How many DJs invented sound equipment? I thought David was nothing short of brilliant. I mean, he's changed a lot over the years, but in those, what I remember, my fondest memories were of absolute out-of-your-mind brilliance. Like thinking of things that no one else would think of.
Up until that time, tweeters were not found on loudspeakers in bunches. They were single. You would have a loudspeaker with a tweeter in it. David's idea was to take the tweeter out of the loudspeaker and put it overhead on a dance floor, but not facing down, not firing downward to the audience, but firing outward. So it'd be like a ripple in the water. You know, you throw a stone in the water and the ripple goes outward. That was his idea. And as I said earlier, that I thought that it was too much, putting 4 tweeters, or actually 8 tweeters on a dance floor. But he didn't think so, and he was right. It was wonderful. Richard Long was a competitor. He was an engineer, sound engineer, who did some of the top clubs in the world. He liked to do real big clubs. And he did some real nice clubs.
Richard Long was my mentor and the greatest sound man that ever lived, if you ask me. In my eyesight, and a lot of other people's eyesight. Richard Long was the one who created garage sound and Studio 54, which was the biggest thing that any sound installer could say they ever did.
Richard wasn't even doing, I mean, he did sound with David at the Loft, but when Gallery first opened, Richard really wasn't doing sound yet on the scale that he started doing sound in a couple of years after that. So I mean, this was 1972. I was 15 the first time I went to the Loft. I never heard a sound system before or since that good. And I'm not talking about 99 Prince Street. I'm talking about 647 Broadway, the original Loft.
The garage, the rooms were different. You know, the garage was a garage, so it was concrete. So it didn't absorb sound like the Loft. The Loft was a wood frame loft. The garage, I really don't like comparing the garage to any space that I ever heard because it was just so unique. You know, between the cement and the fact that they did acoustical treatment to the room, it was like, I would have to say the best sound system I ever heard. The loudness in the garage was due to the fact that Larry Levan was becoming tone deaf in one ear. And instead of going by reference, he was going by hearing. So before you knew it, everybody was like screaming, holding their ears and stuff. You could be at the garage, whether it was full or empty, and the bass was as tight. I can't even describe the tightness. It was just there. It was punching tight. It was tight. That's the only word I can describe it.
us, it opened up in '80 because that's when the doors were open to us because it was predominantly a gay club, and it was very well kept secret for them. But once we got our hands on there and they were able to open the doors to the other walks of life, that's when it became more and more popular because then they had a Friday and a Saturday night to compete with. There are a few people that we know that were there with us, but they were reluctant to accept what we were doing. I had my issues in the beginning. I was a little homophobe. It was a gay club, and then the people who ran it were gay. But after a while, when you feel like you were there, we were part of that no matter what. I mean, and our friends in the beginning, they said, "Oh, you got to go into the gay lodge, and that's what they used to call it, the gay lodge.
Because there were times I'd go to parties and I would see tensions flare between straights and gays. It got to a point where management had to make a separation. You know, even though a lot of people were going Fridays, I could be online on a Friday to get my coat to go home, and I could hear people saying, "Yo, you got to come Saturday. You got to come Saturday." Because Saturday still was the predominantly night, but there was a.
This did not happen at the Loft. You went to the Loft because you wanted a mixed crowd. Period.
That was more earthy.
Right. You wanted a very mixed crowd. You looked for it, and it was this. It was the one singular for all of us, whether it was the garage, the Loft, or both. It was the one singular experience that has made us what we are today. Changed my life.
Larry influenced so many different people. He brought cultures together: black, white, Hispanic, gay, straight. He brought women and men closer together too, because they would hang out, you know, like all of us. I think fag hat maybe started during that time. That was a big thing, to be a fag hat, because if he wasn't, you couldn't get into the garage. So you had to learn how to relate and deal with different people that maybe you was told not to, you know, that they shouldn't be a part of your life, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in this place and you're listening to the best music you've ever heard in your life, and everyone's coming together. It had gotten where everyone had found themselves because they was hanging out in this place where you could be yourself and you could be fabulous.
Like that when you see that there's so many people that like you and like the same things, all you know is that you found a place that you really enjoy being at, and you love the surroundings and everything that's going on there, you know, and what people, how the whole experience makes you feel. You know, it's good to be able to have that, you know what I mean, because hopefully it helps them to get to that next level, you know, in dealing with their own lives, you know, with everything else. You know, I mean, it's so much easier for them now, you know, because it's so widely accepted, but back then it just, it was very difficult.
Gay people couldn't dance together. Two men could not dance together in New York.
In New York City. I mean, music-wise, I might have given them a good time, but things didn't evolve to that point at all. Because, like Steve said, men were not allowed to dance together. And if the lights came on, then it was the police to hear.
That's it. And that's it. The cops are there.
When the sanctuary came, well, that was part of the
They beat you up.
That's part of the excuse of coming in, so that they could break your head. That was part of the excuse. In other words, you got your head broken, but that was the club was the excuse they came in for.
But when after the Stonewall, then, and when places could be gay and guys could dance together,
really went
that
crazy.
Basically changed the whole face of what happened.
Stonewall it's still hitting the clock.
Was a single event that triggered all this to happen.
And the majority are still in the closet about it.
Because all the clubs after that, all the great clubs like the Sanctuary and the Haven and the Tamberlane and Limelight on 7th Avenue South and Les Jardins and Hollywood and the Gallery and the Loft and the Garage and all these places that came.
Probably sit here and
name clubs forever. Man, there was all kinds of places.
I think that Francis Grasso and Sanctuary was definitely a milestone as far as the beginning of what we relate to the underground today. I mean, there were other things going on, but, you know, so many people that we think we're influenced by now, people like Larry and David and Nicky and David Rodriguez, all these people are, you know, other
DJs that, you know, been doing a long time now, they were, you know, at the Sanctuary. They were being influenced there, or influenced by people who were influenced by the Sanctuary. It was a very special time. I mean, that was the beginning of gay pride and a new openness. This was a basically, you know, it was mixed, but, you know, there's a lot of big gay scene, and they were coming out. You know, they were just starting to be able to say that out in public, and there was a certain freedom in this underground scene. A lot of clubs that were happening then were a lot more commercial, you know. Very happening, but more predictable. They were not telling a story with the music. Sanctuary, very important. Loft, very important. Just like the Garage, very important. You know, these were the ones that really, you know, the foundation, the tree that, you know, is the base of everything.
I don't think that, like, when we started doing, you know, rave parties, I don't think that without knowing Paradise Garage, the sound system, what that club meant to the people that went there, I don't think that, you know, doing what I did in Brooklyn could have ever happened. The focus on what the Garage and the early Loft parties, that was what's going on all over the world today, really. People just throwing parties, bringing people in and having fun with music.
Loft music, garage music, house music, I think are all one and the same. You know, because the Loft set it all up. You know, the garage made it real. You know, and probably the warehouse solidified that. You know, in this culture. You know, made it commercial even. You know, in a lot of different countries and in a lot of different ways. The warehouse did that. But, you know, then you have all your other spin-offs of what it is, your jungle this, your drum and bass that, so on and so forth, you know. And as more, you know, as more new genres of music come out and stuff like that, flare up and burn hot and die off, it keeps coming right back to the sense of what it all is, which is loft/garage/house.
It became the blueprint to what we call the global DJ culture. The cost was unforeseen.
There was a lot of acceleration going. They were going so bad.
I remember first hearing about one of the sounds we got and then all of a sudden
it took the major environment and the music and the fear that these guys have preached having sexual
all of a sudden thank God major artists is gone. So that's the key there, all these different people.
We didn't know that having sexual hotness was anything, you know, wrong with it.
A whole generation
I remember specifically somebody going on stage and telling people very seriously on how dangerous this whole thing was and how the combination of drug taking and unprotected sex was a surefire way for people to get this unnamed disease. And I have to think that it was so very sad to see how little the crowd cared about it, or the majority of the people there. And it did not really change their behavior one single iota. It really, you know, they had this sort of get high, dance, let's have sex behavior that it had to be 82, 83 maybe, I don't know, but it was just like really sad for me. Even at the time I just felt like, look, they're not getting it, are they? And I think by the time people realized they were sick, it was too late. Sometimes they were gone in a matter of weeks. It was devastating. Sometimes I have to really hold myself back when I talk to other people who are not in a similar situation, people who haven't lost 50 or 60 friends, people that they used to know and see every day or every week and hang out with. And if you haven't lost that many people around you in that short of a time, you will not understand. And I think that at large what it did is it completely decimated a whole generation out of some of the brightest and most creative talent they had. If you don't think that's significant, I don't know what is.
When Mike Brody started getting sick, I wrote him a letter so that Eduardo, the guy who we gave our ticket to, would take it to him. And it said, this is what the letter said: "What can I say? You gave me 11 great years, and it is not over yet. Your spirit will always be remembered for the rest of my life. Because of you, you gave me the vision of music as a dancer. A million thanks for your personal caring from an 11-year devoted member. I will always remember him for giving me Paradise Garage."
When Michael wasn't around much, people said, why isn't he around? And when he was around, he looked fine, walked fine, talked fine. Nobody saw, there was nothing to see. You know, so we didn't think, so we weren't sure. And then we were told garage was gonna stay open. We were like, well, I guess he's fine. Okay. Michael Brody brought us to his office. It was one of the first times he was at the club in a while. And we all went into the office, and we were sitting in the office, and he turned around to everybody and said, we're closing. I'm not going to continue the garage. And that's when Larry got up and walked out. Just got up and walked out. And I got up and went after Larry. So I don't know what else was said at the meeting. But I realized at that point that Michael was not that well. We went looking for spaces all the time. And sometimes Michael would sit down when we were looking for a space and just like take a little rest. And I knew Michael was tired, and I knew he was fatigued, and I knew he was battling the disease, but I didn't know how bad he was. And I don't think he knew how bad he was. I just think he just didn't think he had the strength. I don't think he thought he was dying.
Michael Brody basically was telling the staff, to prepare for the closing and find another. That's after when you guys walked out. If you could find another job, and just trying to, 3 weeks before your job is over, how much preparing can you do? But I do remember, were you with him when he turned the sound system on? Because after when he walked out of that room, the sound system went on, and he blew a lot of speakers. Yeah, he blew every bass driver in the room.
He was upset. He freaked out. I mean, you're hearing your job, you're hearing everything that you know is stopping, and you have hardly no time to prepare for it. He closed the club because he was dying. He didn't have the health, he didn't have the energy to keep it going. And he didn't want to keep the club going while somebody else to run it. It was his. It was his idea, it was his thought, it was his baby. He built it, he opened it, he bored the garage, and he wanted to take it away with him. He didn't want to leave it in anybody else's hands because he didn't know what anybody else would do with it. He didn't know if anybody could keep it going the way he kept it going. It was his. He wanted it to close. But he left everything for Jaime, Larry, to just reopen another club. He just knew he just couldn't do it any longer. He couldn't keep it going. Yeah, it is.
once Michael knew he couldn't beat it, you know, so that freaked Larry out. At one point, the garage was the club, Larry was nobody. Then Larry became everything. And then the garage and Larry together were huge. Then it ended. And he was devastated by it.
The last year and a half, 2 years he was alive, and I started working at Sound Factory. He would always come. He would always come on Saturday night, and he would come in the booth, and he always felt really, really comfortable. You know, he would stand there in the booth or stand beside me, and just he would always be complimenting on the records I produced or remixed, and you know, or going from one record to the next, and this, that, and the other. And he just said, you know, he was like, considering the fact that you and I got started in this business at the same time, he said, you know, shit is finally happening for you. I was like, well, you know, Larry, things happened for me in Chicago. It may not have happened in here, you know, here in New York, but stuff happened for me in Chicago before I got back. And he was like, yeah, but you know, I remember this one thing he told me. He said if he had a choice of things happening for him now as opposed to 10 years before, he would have chose now, because he would at least be able to appreciate it a whole lot better. You know, that much I do remember him saying. But he would hang out with me in the booth, and it would just be like old times. You know, and a lot of times he would want to play with me and play one-on-one, but he was afraid to. You know, because I mean, Sound Factory, you know, there's 3,000 people in this room. It's packed. You know, and people would see Larry in the booth with me and stuff like that, and some, you know, a lot of them being, you know, diehard Larry fans would think, well, maybe he's going to play. You know, and I would have turned the turntables up to him any time, but a lot of times he just said no. You know, he wouldn't do it. He was too afraid, and probably his hands were unsteady, and, you know, it would blow his high. You know, and immediately he would run out of the room, and that happened a lot.
Towards the end, I mean, we had sort of kind of separated after the garage kind of separated, and we went out separate.
Most of us separated.
Most of us separated, I'm just saying in terms of myself. So when Larry had to come to my house to, you know, get money or ask for money to support his habit or his addiction, at that point I knew everybody else had fucked him, because he never had to come to me for that. We never had to go to each other for that kind of thing. So to have him at my door with that, I knew at that point something was wrong. So we sat down and we talked about it. And, you know, he gave me like the bad, you know, people thought that, you know, he was just da-da-da-da. Drugs being, let's quote, the bad guy. But again, how many of us did do it and got away with it? I mean, you know, most of us didn't die from it. Yeah, and got through it and got over it. So that was his same vein. He wasn't doing it to be destructive. It just caught him. Being real, Larry would take you to the bottom of the pit as well as to the top. Oh, you got to remember, this is a celebrity that you're talking about. So a lot of the insulation that people thought that they knew about Larry, they didn't know. And one of them is the myth of him killing himself with drugs. No. But did he take drugs? Yes. Did he know they was going to kill him? No. Come on, let's not be stupid.
I was walking down St. Mark's, and he was really down. And I hadn't seen him in like 5 years because I had to get my act cleaned up.
Right, we all, yeah.
And he came out and he stopped me. He says, you know what, David? How do you do it? I was like, I just can't no more. How do I stay clean?
Yeah.
And he was like, I really wish I could be there. I said, Larry, you could be there. We're all there. There's a bunch of us. And she's such a bitch. She says, well, okay, I gotta go cop. I was like, you fuck. Right. You motherfucker. How could you?
From what I saw from him at the end, he was with some friends that, you know, where I saw he was saying there was nothing wrong with that, but I was just so surprised to see him in a different situation that wasn't like a big Manhattan apartment or whatever. To me, I think it was never really for the money. Larry made money, I'm sure, but just to see him in an environment with regular folks, regular people that, like myself, just regular people, and to see him in that environment and to see how he changed and toward the end how he knew what really mattered and who to be around. And I don't think he wanted other people to see him also in the way that he was, like some of the big shots or whoever. He didn't want them to see him.
He is probably the single biggest influence next to Nicky Siano for why I do this. Everyone has a God that they pray to for whatever reason. I think everybody has more than one, to be honest with you. At least, I mean, I have one that is self, that I turn to daily, without a doubt, you know. And then when I have to do this, and I have to go out and put my best foot forward, you know, Larry is the God that I turn to. You know, his voice is the one that I hear. You know, because he was the purest, I think. You know, and I'm not trying to paint the kind of picture like he was the ultimate and saying all these things because he's not here now, but he was. You know, he is the reason why this job is what it is, why it's a career. You know, why, you know, I wish most of these kids out here now could have experienced him at his best. You know, all you had to do was hear him at his best once, and you'd be thoroughly convinced. You can take all those nights that he wasn't on. You know what I mean? Because you know what he can do when he does it. You know, when he's fired up and he's lit and he's feeling good and he's ready for it. You know, you couldn't beat him with an ugly stick. You know, that's what I draw most of my inspiration from.
There was something there that was really special. I'm just so excited by it, like a little kid in a candy store. Listen to this record, I love it. You know, listen to how exciting this record is. It makes me go crazy. And I'll stand in the booth and go crazy when the record's playing because I'm into it. I'm into the record. Larry was the same way. Music moved him in the same way. That's my last memory, laughing with Larry. About 6 months later, he died. There's a better way. I gotta stop now.
you. You better bring me down and let me know. Tell me about it. I love you all. I'm gonna miss you. And we're gonna all miss the Paradise Garage.